Welcome to another edition of the Cavalier podcast. It's your boy, Mac. Joining me today is Cavs beat reporter of Cleveland.com, Ethan Sands. How you doing, Ethan?
I am doing great. Thank you again for having me on, Mac. It's a pleasure to be talking with you.
Man, I'll tell you what, heading into this second half of the season, I think that expectations are sky high at this point in time, and rightfully so, after some of the moves that this team has made. It felt like a flurry of them, right? You got rid of Lonzo Ball, which opened up the roster spot for Naquan Tomlin. What a journey that's been for that young man. You acquire James Harden for the services of Darius Garland. Personally, one of my fan favorites. Sad to see him go, but I do understand for basketball reasons. Like, this is an elevation, and he is a superior talent. You got Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroder in a move for DeAndre Hunter that felt like it was mostly about cap constraints at times, while also serving the purpose of filling some of the holes and flaws of this team when it comes to point of attack defense and dribble penetration, two things that these guys bring a lot of. And it just felt as if this team had somewhat of a soft reboot, not a full-on reset, not a restructuring of any of the major pieces. Darius Garland and DeAndre Hunter notwithstanding, but you understand what I'm saying. A soft reboot of sorts. And now as they pivot into this second half of the season, I do have to ask you to take your reporter cap off and put your fan cap on. And just let me know, as a fan, do you feel like these moves they have made have better positioned them to compete in the confines of playoff basketball? Let's just start there.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is one of the best rosters that they could have constructed, right? Obviously, the James Harden for Darius Garland is the main headliner for this conversation, but it's more than that, right? It's the playoff experience that they gained. Over 170 playoff games for James Harden in his NBA career, and he's played in 16 straight playoffs. He has never missed a playoff series when it comes to his career in the NBA. Then you add Dennis Schroder into this conversation, 70-plus playoff games under his belt. And that's not even going to mention the Eurobasket, World Basketball competition that he's played in championship games.
He's a Hall of Famer
right.
because of all this, right?
That's a big question that we have, right? And it's also Keon Ellis, the youthfulness, the defensive intensity. I just think they're the pieces that they made. It's not necessarily the framework of the roster. We obviously understood coming into the season that this was already one of the best rosters constructed since LeBron James had left, but they got better in every avenue that they needed to. They added maturity, they added leadership, they added accountability, and they added a skill set that was lacking when it came to the defensive end of the floor, plus added scoring and passing with James Harden. So I think every move that they made was extremely strategic. Obviously, you mentioned the Lonzo Ball move that ultimately ended up giving Naquan Tomlin a spot. Kenny Atkinson has talked throughout the season about his importance in the defensive versatility, especially after losing DeAndre Hunter, who was 6'8". Now you plug in 6'10" Naquan Tomlin. Is he a little raw defensively? Yes, but he still is learning, and I think he's become a sponge that is learning on the fly and one of those players that is only going to get better with added opportunities.
I think that what you have seen is the Cavaliers add a ton of versatility, right? There's a whole size conversation of it all. You added two additional guards in the likes of Schroder at 6'1" and Ellis, who is 6'4", 6'5" on a good day, but he plays bigger than his size. Both of them truly do, especially at the point of attack on the defensive side of the ball. You're out on DeAndre Hunter, who brings that 6'8" size. But as you mentioned, Naquan Tomlin, that's not a small dude out there. And he brings a lot of hustle, a lot of heart, a lot of energy. And while he is raw, there is a certain brand and joy for the game of basketball that he just exudes. And I think that will eventually pay off down the line for this Cavaliers team. And whether or not he begins the postseason in the rotation, he will play a role, in my opinion. That said, there's still some question marks. We still have not seen what James Harden and Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley look like that on the court together. So when Jarrett Allen was there, who has already developed a very fine chemistry with the likes of James Harden, we already knew that he was going to elevate the bigs, right? This is something that he does. He's done it for years. He did it with Clint Capella. He made Ivica Zubac a ton of money, right? He is one of these guys that knows how to put the bigs in the proper spot. And he's just good for gravity out there. So as we kind of transition here into the James Harden of it all, was there one thing that Harden brings to the table from tip-off, from the first appearance in Wanago that stuck out to you the most?
I think you mentioned it, right? It's the passing. Everybody knows he's a top 10 scorer in NBA history, but the passing is what unlocks everybody around him, because not only is he a ball handler that can take Donovan Mitchell off the ball, we know Donovan Mitchell is better suited to be a two, be a secondary creator than having to pound the ball up the floor every possession. We now see that James Harden is also one of the best passers in NBA history. I believe he's top 15 in assists in NBA history. And we've seen that with passes to Jay Tyson behind the back as he's cutting to the basket in the pocket, passes that we would not see anybody else willingly make in the half court. Obviously, the spacing with Jarrett Allen, where he's helped him evolve into one of the best centers in the NBA, especially in the Eastern Conference, when we see him without Evan Mobley, right? And that only bodes well for the vertical spacing and the half roll, the elbow free throw line extended, where Evan Mobley is going to thrive with James Harden there, because there's going to be so much more spacing around him. And obviously, we talk about the Evan Mobley offensive focal point that was ultimately a failure at the beginning of the season, but we also understand that it was because he was on the floor by himself. He didn't have Donovan Mitchell out there during those minutes, so he was getting swarmed. Now you have the opportunity to either have Jalen Tyson, Sam Merrill, James Harden, Donovan Mitchell out there. He's not only going to be the defense's focus, and that's going to free him up mentally. It's going to allow him to play with a different level of freedom and also still have the impact on the defensive end. So to me, it's the passing that is going to unlock the people around him, and also the players that he has, which are shooters and Sam Merrill and Jalen Tyson, the size and Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, and then also the number 1A, 1B option in Donovan Mitchell that allows all these things to come to fruition.
You see so much of this talked about, right? And we know Harden, top 15 in assists and points. The scoring obviously is usually what sticks out to people just because of how flamboyant his game is. It is very aesthetically pleasing when he gets it going out there. And I think that's something that we can all admit to ourselves. But I have to say, Ethan, there's one thing to see this from afar, I think, and it's an entirely different thing to see this as a part of your team, right? To see James Harden elevate Jarrett Allen in such a small sample of games, just 3 games that those two have shared the court with one another, that has been a real sight to behold. And this is no disrespect to Darius Garland at all, because Darius Garland had formulated a wonderful chemistry in his own right with Jarrett Allen that was formulated over years of being together. But Harden, he brings loads of experience. We know with it, he has the baggage in the postseason, but as of right now, like I don't know if you listen to any of my streams, but the one thing that I said numerous times after getting my emotions out after everything occurred was that, listen, I'm going to enter this whole situation with a cautious optimism, because despite the playoff baggage that he has brought to the table, some of the labeling that's been thrown out there, even by myself at times, it's clear as day that this team, their ceiling has been elevated. And I'm trying to remain tempered in my expectations. I'm trying to at least get to the playoffs before we get there and we start talking big talk and about how far this team can truly make it. But the returns are encouraging with Harden alone. We'll get to the other 2 guys in just a minute. But I got to say, like, seeing Jarrett Allen consistently involved in the offense damn near every possession as a roll man or a short roll passer, something that you already mentioned that Evan Mobley will be doing more of too as they try and work him in here. But I'm just very, very interested how this continues as you continue to add these guys back. Once Dean Wade gets back in the rotation, once Evan Mobley's out there trying to figure out where he fits in all this. Eventually, Max Strus, I would assume, will eventually come back. I hope, at the very least. And then you got to figure out rotations and lineup combinations, and that's going to be the fun part of it on the fan side. For Kenny Atkinson, I do not envy him, but I think that the versatility that they are now working with is much better than it was to begin the season. And so let's transition here to one of the lesser pieces that we acquire, but still a huge piece in their own right, and that's Keon Ellis. Keon Ellis is somebody in Sacramento that had been, I feel like, and this is just me, I feel like they were wasting his talents. Obviously, it didn't quite fit their timeline. They were structured for a rebuild. They still very much are. I thought entering the trade deadline, they'd be shipping pieces off left and right. Lo and behold, that was not the case. I don't know what the hell they're doing over there, but I can say thank you to Sacramento for giving us Keon Ellis, because that's a piece from a point of attack standpoint that we definitely needed. And Ethan, I'll get your thoughts on this here too, just because this is relative. When the Cavaliers moved, when they moved Isaac Okoro to get Lonzo Ball, my state of mind was, okay, this is a guy that can not only replicate some of that defense at the point of attack, but can also be a disruptor in the passing lanes and just a general chaos agent, while being able to knock down the three-point shot, at least historically speaking, and can facilitate and rebound, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, it did not work out, but in moving off of Lonzo, they kind of signaled that we're gonna address the issue here right now, and we're going to go out and allow Keon Ellis to kind of take over that role that had been missing what felt like all season long. So when it comes to Ellis, is there a particular part in his game that you feel is underutilized? We talk about the point of attack defense. We talk about the three-point shot making, especially off ball. But is there a part of his game that you think the Cavaliers can actually tap into that Sacramento may not have?
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there's so many things about the game of these players that we don't notice until, as you mentioned with James Harden, they're right in front of us, right? The biggest problem with DeAndre Hunter's defensive game was when he was off the ball and he would get lost, right? He would stop focusing and not be paying attention, and then his man would cut behind him, back cut it, and get an easy basket, right? That's never going to be the case with Keon Ellis. I think that is the biggest strength for him, is his defensive focus when he's off the ball, his ability to deny players from getting the basketball, and then just his handiness. Like, I remember the first play that he got subbed in when he was in Sacramento after getting traded. Like,
yeah, what a crazy thing. Surreal for him, I'm sure.
Right. And it was like, oh, you're going to tip the ball, save it from going out of bounds, and then create a transition opportunity all in the same of 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds. And it embodied the kind of player that he wants to be. And he understands that obviously he's got to knock down three-point shots when they're available, and he's got to be able to willingly take those looks and all these things. But defensively, that's where the Cavs are going to ask him to be a menace, a pest, a harasser when it comes to opposing offenses. And I think that is the level of his game where he is going to be relied on the most and asked to do the most.
Yeah, I knew that he could be a disruptor. I knew he was somebody that, as I mentioned, could be somewhat of a chaos agent out there. And that was apparent from the first possession, right? First defensive possession out there, where he's out there mucking things up. And you've seen it play out in his 4 games as a Cavalier. By the way, if you guys out there streaming this are not aware, Keon Ellis, in his first 4 appearances as a Cavalier, is averaging 5 points, 3 boards, 1.8 assists, 2 steals. Pretty big, right? We always love to see those stats high. But the part here that is going to stick out like a sore thumb is the field goal percentage. Obviously, that 3-point percentage. 38.9% from the field, including 33.3%. Now, I've said this like 3,000 times, Ethan, so I'm pretty well versed in it at this point in time. Keon, like 11 of his 15 3-point attempts have been considered wide open. He's getting good looks, something that I think will routinely happen with him, right? And I think that as long as he is knocking down 36, 37% of them, it's going to be great. because you know that that's somebody that the defense does have to account for. When we talk about three-point shooting, so much is made of percentages and volume. Not enough is talked about in reference to gravity. Just purely having the ability to draw the defensive attention. Now, if you're having him in lineups beside a James Harden, which they have done, if you're having him out there beside Donovan Mitchell or some of the other really great shooters on this team, 2 top 5 guys in that area in Jalen Tyson and Sam Merrill, who are also no slouch at the point of attack themselves, that's a lot for the defense to have to account for. You have to pick and choose and just kind of pick your poison with what you want to take your chances with, especially when you're talking about adding a big man out there that is a threat as a rim roller in Jarrett Allen and having to deal with an Evan Mobley as well in that same vein. So as long as Ellis is able to elevate that percentage to around 36, 37%, I think this is truly going to be a move that ends up paying off. And I do understand that he will be entering restricted free agency, but it is to my knowledge, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they have acquired his bird rights. So they can sign him. And I think they would not have made this deal had they not intended for that to be the case. But on the other end of this token, on the other part of this trade is a guy who a lot of people, including myself, felt was just a genuine asshole before. And that is Dennis Schroder. But don't get me wrong, you need that on your team. You need an element of that on your team and in some form. We had it with George Niang. We know that obviously they used Niang's contract along with Karis LeVert and a small bit of draft capital to get DeAndre. Didn't work out. It's all good. You have replaced that certain personality type with a Dennis Schroder, and I'm very excited about the potential with all the wealth of experience, as you mentioned, that he brings to the table. I'm excited about what that means come the playoffs, as we have seen Dennis, even just last year with Detroit, give a team like New York problems as a ball handler and as a three-point marksman. Is there an area of Dennis Schroder's game that you think is not talked about enough?
The downhill gravity that he creates, right? Because Lonzo Ball couldn't get to the basket if he wanted to, right? That was an area of his game that had lacked since the knee injury, and obviously Darius Garland didn't have the same burst with his toe injuries. So the Cavs needed somebody to get downhill to be able to disrupt the defense in that way. And obviously Craig Porter Jr. was doing it in bursts, but he wasn't necessarily getting the amount of time on the court necessary to be able to make those moves. Dennis does that inherently, right? When he's on the floor, there is the attack to the basket, especially with his know-how of angles and spacing, and then his creation from there. And obviously we know that in Kenny Atkinson's offense, the idea is drive, kick, swing. And that is the perfect offense in Kenny Atkinson's system. And now you add in other shooters around that, and it creates more opportunities. And we also know that Dennis Schroder can make tough baskets at the rim. So there's multiple different opportunities, but if there's one that we needed to hone in on, it's that ability to get downhill, get to the basket, and even just Nash dribble and find other opportunities if need be because of his ball handling capabilities and his just experience in the NBA to be able to manipulate defenses and create space in that kind of setting.
Yeah, I mean, entering the deadline, I think it was inherent on this team to figure out what direction they wanted to go in regards to that backcourt rotation. Because Darius Garland, obviously, not quite 100%, hasn't really been 100% all season long since the toe injury that was re-aggravated last playoffs. But in my opinion, Schroder is the perfect type of acquisition to address this. Because coming to Cleveland, he was averaging 10.1 drives per game. That would have instantly become third highest on the team behind Darius and behind Donovan. It's still third highest behind James and behind Donovan. And right. The one thing that I will remain curious to see is, okay, you have Keon now. You got Sam, who's just a sharpshooter of the highest order. You got so many guys who can play on the ball at this point in time, including Dennis. Are they going to be more comfortable allowing him to play off the ball at this point in time because there's only so much basketball to go around. And one would assume that come the playoffs, they're going to want to stagger Donovan, they're going to want to stagger James, and they're going to go with specific lineup combinations that have both of those guys playing at the one, sometimes one of the two playing at the two with Dennis at the one. And I would assume that as the season goes on and you do get some of these guys back and you are trying to tinker around and seeing what fits and works best, you're going to see more off-ball possessions from Dennis than you had in Sacramento. And the one area, and this is where I'm going with this, that he has to be able to contribute in, at least moving forward more, is that three-point shot. This season, Dennis is shooting 13.3% from three-point distance with the Cavaliers through his first 4 appearances. That's no bueno. Obviously, 2 of 15 sucks ass, and you got to be better. But I've been encouraged because, for one, you need somebody who is unafraid to take that shot. I will say, though, I do have to throw this out there. I think the shot selection could be a little better, could be a little more judicious with when he elects to pull up or to pull the trigger for that matter. But I do appreciate the fact that he is unafraid to do so. Now, I also acknowledge that Dennis was not shooting the best before coming here, and that has to be noted. But I do think that in order for him to bring the highest potential to the rotation that he can, he has to be able to knock down that off-ball shot. I think he will, but similar to Keon, we just got to kind of give it some time because we are just 4 games into this experience with both guys. But to your point, the dribble penetration, the gravity, the downhill gravity that he can generate, that is a good thing because it can not only, one, collapse the interior of a defense and open up cutting lanes out of the dunker spot for a guy like a Jarrett Allen or a Jalen Tyson, who's becoming a solid pick and roll man, which is crazy to say that at his position, and Evan Mobley, whoever else. But Dennis's ability to get downhill, attack the basket, go for and make some of these contested attempts and facilitate out of the pick and roll, these are all wonderful things to have. And again, I don't want this to come off as a slight to Craig Porter Jr. because I know some people will perceive it that way. It's always that way when you have a situation like this. But Dennis does this consistently. Even if the shot isn't falling, you can bet on him getting downhill and putting pressure on the interior of a defense. And those rim pressures are huge for opening things up for some of the players around you. I do want to go at this point and ask you this since I brought the name up. Where does all of this leave Craig Porter Jr. in your opinion?
I have been a Craig Porter Jr. supporter since he got to the Cleveland, right? 2-way contract, elevated to a standard deal. And obviously this summer he put in so much work to be getting opportunities. And then he was getting minutes and then got taken away. All these different things, was stepping up when Lonzo Ball. I do, and I will continue to say this, I think Kenny Atkinson made that move too late. He should have done it earlier. He should have sent Lonzo Ball to the bench sooner. But Craig Porter Jr., his skill set and confidence level is what is holding him back right now. Because when it comes to his ability to get downhill, his mid-range shot, his ability to know where his spots are, his shooting percentage, all are reliable. But whether or not he's willing to actually take those shots is a different conversation. We had this conversation with Sam Merrill earlier to the season when he's been adding to his game, getting back to Utah State, Sam Merrill, when he has the ball in his hands, where he's reading the defense, where if the guy tries to close out, he's reading the closeout and either doing a sidestep 3 or escape dribble 3, or he's attacking that closeout and getting to the rim and creating from there. But the biggest thing of this conversation was Sam Merrill admitted that earlier into his career, he was only driving in hopes to find a pass. That doesn't make you dangerous. And defenses know that. Defenses are aware of that. So you're not going to see defenses trying to collapse in the paint when Sam Merrill is doing that earlier into his career. They're doing it now because he's actually trying to get to his floater, get to his left-hand runner, all these things. But Craig Porter Jr. still hasn't gotten over that hump. He's still looking for a pass rather than looking for his own shot. We've seen it when he's one of the main scorers on the floor. When it's him and Jalen Tyson running together, those two know that they have to score the basketball. Against Miami earlier this season in Miami, those two knew that they had to do a lot. We've seen Craig Porter Jr. grow. It was a great game. And you've gotten to see the growth of his passing acumen this season, which has been great, right? 12 assists in a recent game. Astounding. But you also need to be able to score the basketball to be a threat. And that's why Dennis Schroder is likely going to pop him over in that rotation, because he's willing to do those things. And even though Craig Porter Jr. might be a better defender than Dennis Schroder at this point in his career, he still doesn't do enough offensively to negate that, right? So I think that's why Dennis is going to get more minutes than Craig Porter Jr. is this season. I think Kenny Atkins doesn't necessarily want to go away from Craig Porter Jr., but I've been saying this as well all season. If there's a player who has the shortest leash on this Cleveland Cavaliers team, it is Craig Porter Jr., because the expectation is so high, because he's on an expiring contract, because they don't necessarily know what is going to happen with his club option at the offseason. I think it's important to note that although he has done so much in the few minutes that he's been given, he's not necessarily going to be rewarded. And I think that was telling in the Cavs going and getting James Harden, but also getting Keon and Dennis Schroder, who not only play the one, but can play the 1 and the 2, while Craig Porter Jr. can only really play the 1.
It's solid points all the way around. I thank you for bringing up the contractual obligations of it all, because at the end of the day, it is a business, and the Cavaliers are operating from a standpoint of, hey, we got to save some money somehow. You saw that Kobe Altman and Mike Gansey and company, the rest of the front office, saved $100+ million at this deadline, which is not talked about enough. We talk about the James Harden of it all. We talk about acquiring the talents of Keon and Dennis, but we're not talking about the luxury tax savings that just occurred. But in reference to Craig in particular on the court, I entered this year thinking, hey, this is the make or break season for you. You have an opportunity. Darius is not 100%. We don't really know what the hell Lonzo will look like. And look how that turned out, obviously. I was rooting for Lonzo. I don't want anybody that is a Lonzo Ball fan to jump on me, because people tend to do that at times. But what I will say is this. There have been points this year where I'm like, this motherfucker has really elevated his game. I just wish he could look more confident in searching for that three-point shot, whether that be the pull-up or simply looking to get to the mid-range area and taking the midi from there, right? I just want to see him attack a defense, because I know it is part of his game. I know he's capable of doing it, but he's not doing it consistently enough. You look at the percentages themselves, and they're fine, right? Craig Porter Jr. this season is shooting 45.8% from the field, including 37.7% from three-point distance. And he's a career 39.1% shooter from deep. But the problem is volume. It's always been volume. Just 1.4 attempts from three-point range this year. And while that does represent a career best for him, if I'm not mistaken, it's not enough, especially in minutes as the lead guard out there, where you need to be able to put pressure on a defense with the threats of that pull-up, or really just offense in general. So for Craig, I think you put it eloquently, got a short leash. I think that the acquisition of Dennis made the writing on the wall crystal clear. You're not going to be able to be afforded the runway that you once were. And while that is unfortunate, I do understand it, because this is a team that is looking to compete for a championship, and they made that crystal clear with the acquisition of James Harden. Somebody else I do want to pivot to here really quickly is Dean Wade. Dean Wade is a litmus test for hoops fans, in my opinion, Ethan. I am very curious to hear your thoughts on what value you think that this guy brings to the table. Because I'm high on Dean Wade. I kind of always have been, but I do need people to put me in check at times when I get a little overboard. So from a pure value standpoint and what he brings to the table, how much do you think, or how high of a value do you think the Cavaliers place upon Dean Wade?
I don't want to be like I know ball or anything, but after the Boston Celtics series where Dean Wade came back and was limping around the court, playing on one leg in game 3, like it was evident that the Cleveland Cavaliers need Dean Wade to be healthy to get out of the Eastern Conference. That's the value that he has. They do not have a better perimeter defender than Dean Wade. They don't have DeAndre Hunter. We know he's a good isolation one-on-one defender. He was horrible when it came to off-ball defense. I said that earlier, right? We know what Keon Ellis can do on the ball and off the ball. He's not big enough to guard Jason Tatum, to guard Jaylen Brown, right? This is the conversation that we're having. And the importance of big defensive wings in the NBA has only grown because of the size that teams are leaning into. And Dean Wade being 6'10", having one of the best or two of the best feet in the NBA when it comes to that size, I think is pivotal to that. But you also talk about Kenny Atkinson coming into the season saying, we know how good you are defensively, but we need you to shoot the basketball. Donovan Mitchell has been saying it. Kenny Atkinson has been saying it. The goal for this season for Dean Wade was for him to shoot the most per 36 three-pointers this season his entire NBA career. Do I know where he's at in that journey? I don't. But all I know is that he can afford to shoot more because the Cavs need him to not pass up open looks, because not necessarily the second shot, the second look that you're going to get is going to be better than the first one. So Dean Wade, because of how he has earned his way through the G League, through being now the longest tenured Cavalier, right, is now one of the most crucial pieces to this team because of the size, because of defensive versatility, because of how the Cavs rebound with him on the floor. And then if you want to stretch it out, how the Cavs could potentially use him as a small ball 5, depending on where the lineups are, the matchups are. Do I want to see them use him as a small ball 5? No, but that's what Kenny Atkinson has been saying that he's willing to do because of the skill level of Dean Wade and the necessity for him to be on the floor. So here's the conversation that we have to have as a media group, as Cavs fans, whatever you are. Who's starting for this team? Is it Dean Wade or is it Jalen Tyson? Because even when Max Strus comes back, it cannot be Max Strus. So I'm leaning towards it being Dean Wade because of the size matchups that the Cavs are going to have. Whether that be the New York Knicks and Jalen Brunson, and obviously Dean Wade being the best suited defender for Jalen Brunson, or the Boston Celtics. Maybe Jason Tatum comes back and you need Dean Wade in that starting lineup. Then you talk about the Detroit Pistons. Cade Cunningham and Dean Wade have had a love-hate relationship for years now. So there is an understanding internally that Dean Wade is one of the most important pieces on this team. And although they have not extended him, it's not because they don't see his value. It's because they're waiting for the right opportunity to do so and seeing what moves they have to make in the offseason. Because as we know, Mac, this team is going to look vastly different than it has in the past, especially not only because of the trade deadline, but because of the contract situations that we have coming up for Donovan Mitchell, for Evan Mobley, for James Harden now, and trying to figure out what is best for this team in this small window to compete for a championship, but again, trying to get out of the second apron come next season.
There's so much. There is so much contextualization that needs to be placed upon the situation where they're at. But we'll start with D Wade since we're talking about him. This whole starting conversation, right? There are caveats to all the options. I've talked about this ad nauseum as of late with Dean Wade. It's great because you don't have to worry about him trying to steal touches away. He is an off-ball player. He will just take the three-point shot. He will spot up. He will cut. He will rebound. It brings the point of attack defense out there that you need against some of the bigger wings in the NBA, which is a virtual certainty come the playoffs, whether that be a Cade, whether that be a Tatum or a Brown, whether that be as a Brunson stopper out there. And I'm going to bring this up again just because I've been arguing with people for the last couple of days. Damn it, Jalen Brunson has had problems with Dean Wade playing defense as the singular individual defender in isolation, out on the island, whatever you want to term it as. He has given Jalen Brunson problems. And I understand that come the playoffs, things are a bit of a different beast. But Dean still represents the Cavaliers' best chance at stopping guys like that can score at the drop of a hat. You're not going to fully contain them. You're not going to fully stop them. You just hope to contain them for long enough for it not to hurt the Cavaliers while he is on the floor. That said, Jalen Tyson, top 2 in the league in three-point percentage. He represents to me the best combination of the skills that you'd want out of that fifth starter. He can handle a bit. He started to develop a really good chemistry with Jarrett Allen in the pick and roll and the on-ball stuff from him, which I'll talk about in just a second. He is a very solid positional rebounder. He is coming into his own as a point of attack defender, though he can pick up fouls a little bit too much. And he plays with an energy and hustle out there that is very similar to Naquan Tomlin at points. All of these different things have culminated in Jalen Tyson looking like the best version of whatever anybody could have conceivably thought he could be entering this year. And he has earned every single bit of play time that he has gotten. That said, he is still just 6'6", 6'7" on his best day. And I understand that while he plays bigger than his size, it does make sense from a balancing standpoint, given all the context I just threw out there, that they place Dean Wade in the starting lineup. I'm not going to be mad at Kenny Atkinson at all because, to be honest with you, I have leaned heavily Jalen Tyson keeping the job, but I see the merits in both sides here. And as I mentioned, perhaps the thing that needs to be considered the most here, Jalen Tyson's on-ball development. It is not a question. When Evan Mobley comes back, he is unquestionably the third option. He will get the rest of whatever's left over from the touches of James Harden and Donovan Mitchell. From a usage standpoint, Jalen Tyson's usage is going to drop. The luxury of Tyson is that he is such a good off-ball player that you can live with that. If you're okay living with that caveat, by all means, continue starting Tyson because he does give you even more gravity than Wade is capable of. But you are robbing him of that potential creator on the ball development. You're robbing him of the potential touches that he might get in that second unit to continue developing on ball, which I think is also important for him as an individual. Go ahead.
Do you mind if I jump in here? Because I'm reading the chat over here, and there's people saying that Dean Wade should get traded now. There's people saying that Dean Wade is overrated. So let's do the statistical analysis because maybe our eyesight is bad, right? Maybe that could be the case.
Sure.
So Dean Wade has a defensive rating of 109.1. That is the best defensive rating for a Cleveland Cavalier that has played at least 40 games this season. That also would, if it was extrapolated over an entire team, be the third best defensive rating in the entire NBA, right? And he's also having the toughest matchups each night when he's on the floor. Okay,
yep.
This is your Jalen Brunson, your Cade Cunningham, your Jalen Browns, your Scotty Barnes. All of these guys, Dean Wade is the one that is taking on these assignments. And Jalen Tyson is also doing that, but in fewer spurts, right? If there's a switch-heavy defensive approach for the Cavs, they want Jalen Tyson and Dean Wade out there on the floor together because those are the two best defenders that they have, right? Point blank. But the other portion of this is you have to think about what the second unit looks like. And we've talked about it. Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Tyson have created a bond that needs to be studied because they have been so good together in the half roll, utilizing him as a screener, all these things. When we're talking about Jalen Tyson and where he has excelled the best, it's where he's again around stars, not necessarily talking about the starting lineup in particular, but say you have a second unit of Donovan, Jalen, Sam Merrill, Dean Wade, and Jarrett Allen. Now you have the spacing, you have the shooting, you have the defense, you have the rim running, you have the pick and roll. I'm just trying to figure out why people are not seeing the validity of the rotations that we've been talking about. Because, yes, right now the Cavs are not fully healthy. So, yes, Dennis Dennis Schroder and Keon Ellis are the first two coming off the bench. But if they were fully healthy and the starting lineup then becomes Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen, the people coming off the bench first are surely Sam Merrill and Jalen Tyson. So maybe the Cavs switch up whether or not James Harden comes out first or Donovan Mitchell comes out first. We've seen it recently that Donovan Mitchell comes out first and James Harden plays a longer stretch. Maybe that's also Kenny Atkinson just trying to get James Harden's legs back under him for this stretch run, right? All these things. But you have to know what combinations and lineups that Kenny Atkinson is trying to put together to get the Cavs to be their best selves. And that's why I asked Kenny before the All-Star break, I said, how excited are you as a point guard coach, as someone who played point guard at a high level, to want to go and play and to watch and go and watch film for a whole week and figure out what combinations and what statistical analysis you can do as someone who gets deeper stats than we do? There's a reason that Dean Wade and Jarrett Allen play together. There's a reason that Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Tyson play together. We can go through the lineup statistical analysis if you wanted us to, but I feel like we would get too nerdy and it would still get lost in the weeds. So yes, statistically, Dean Wade is the best defender on the Cleveland Cavaliers. You can go on eyesight too if you want to. Yeah. There's a realistic strategy that the Cavs are trying to implore when it comes to the starting lineup, while also looking to the rest of the game, because it's 48 minutes, while the New York Knicks might have Jalen Brunson play 45 of them.
I had to go to old Tom Thibodeau route.
Saying. So we have to have the understanding that the Cavs do not do that. They want to rely on their depth. So they have to think about 48 minutes and how those are going to be extrapolated from the rotation that they have. Could they shrink the rotation to 8? Could they shrink the rotation to 10? They've been playing 11, 12 recently. Yes, those are all things that need to be done. But it has to come in where the Cavs see best fit. And that's why Dean Wade as the starter makes most sense, because you get the defensive pressure that is needed on the perimeter to start the game. And then you sub in Jalen Tyson and you're only losing a beat for just a second rather than having to see Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or Jalen Brunson or Cade Cunningham have all these different things.
And all of that, nowhere was Max Strus mentioned either, right? It's been a crazy season. You put it so eloquently. There's not too much I can add additionally to that, because there are certain people, no matter what Dean Wade does, he could limit Jalen Brunson to 1 of 20 from the field over the course of the series. And there are still people that would tell you, no, it doesn't matter. You can't satisfy everybody. He's on a $6.6 million price tag. You're not getting that value from anybody else. To the people that wanted to dump him prior to the deadline, good luck finding a replacement that brought that much value to the table. Good luck with that. I understand. And listen, I'll be transparent. The people in this chat, the people that will eventually listen to this stream that's been following this channel for any period of time, understand. Entering the year, though I have been a Dean Wade fan for the entirety of his stay here. Now, as you mentioned, the longest tenured Cavalier, 7+ seasons now at this point. I entered this year feeling like Naquan Tomlin was eventually going to take those minutes. Obviously, that has not played out that way. Tomlin has earned his role in his own right, but Dean Wade has been probably the most critical that he has ever been for this team, and his value has only gone up after getting rid of the size of DeAndre Hunter. You need somebody that can defend bigger wings out there. I love Keon Ellis. I love the addition, but he is not somebody you're going to ask, like an high school Okoro, who could oftentimes defend up a position to the power forward, taking on the Paolo Bancheros of the world. You're not asking Keon to do that very frequently. In a pinch, maybe. Throughout portions of a game, no, you don't want that smoke. It's not something that you can ask very many players to do, and Dean Wade can do that. The problem with Dean Wade, however, if we're being transparent, obviously health. It's always been health. It's always been the offensive side of the basketball to coincide with that. But the Cavaliers, they value him. Kenny Atkinson, the rest of that coaching staff, they value him. And at this point in time, who the hell am I to question that? Because it's paid off at this point in time. And again, you're never going to satisfy everybody in the chat or in the fan base. It is what it is. But I'm going to pivot here because I don't want to spend the rest of the episode talking about Dean Wade and just ask you this. Because they do have a lot of guards. They do have depth in the front court, but not nearly as much as they did to begin the season at this point in time. Kenny Atkinson, as you mentioned, 11, 12 deep in the regular season as of late. You get to the playoffs, traditionally playoff rotations shorten to around 8, 9 players. Entering the playoffs today, if the season ended, who is your 9-man or playoff rotation?
Whew, put me on the spot here. Okay.
I got to do it to you. I'm sorry.
Let's do it. So Don, James, Jalen, Dean, Jarrett, Evan, that's 6. Sam Merrill's in there, that's 7. Oh boy.
Yeah, that's where I was at yesterday. Somebody stumped me with this. I'm like, do you want to go with Dean? Like, if you're not starting Dean, do you keep Dean? Is Strus in? Does Keon? Where does he factor in?
Dean was like the 4th person I said. Dean was in there. I got 7 right now. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to figure out, because if you go Quan, is he going to be ready for that? Right? Is he going to be ready for the opportunity that is the playoffs? And obviously,
I'll be honest with you, Ethan, I don't have Quan in my immediate 9-man rotation. I don't. I think that those minutes are better served between some mixture of Jalen, Dean, and Ellis.
Okay, so let's go through this. So 9-man rotation. First 5. James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. Boom, done. 6. Jalen Tyson, Sam Merrill, right? I said those 2 are going to be the first people to come off the bench. Now you have 2 more spots. When we're talking about a 9-man rotation, we're talking about the players that they went and acquired for these positions. But I'm going to say this. I think Naquan Tomlin has to be in my 9 because of his defensive versatility. And
that's fair.
Unfortunately for the guy that you have a jersey behind you of, I don't think he's getting minutes because Larry Nance Jr. has not played to his caliber, and I think they need that intensity. They need that tenacity that Naquan Tomlin brings, and also the rebounding. The swing skill for Naquan Tomlin is his three-point shooting. If he's able to knock down shots from the corner, we're going to have a different conversation. So as much as I like Keon Ellis. So I'm going to say that the Cavs are going to play 10, and I'm going to mess with your thing.
That's what I think.
They're going to play 10. So the 10 is going to be Keon, Dennis, and Naquan. Those are my 10, right? Because I don't think you trade for these guys if you're not going to use them in the playoffs, 1. Mm-hmm. 2, I truly believe that Kenny Atkinson talking about Naquan Tomlin as a playoff performer from like the first 2 months of the season while he was still on a 2-way contract, that is important. Right? Yes. And I'm not saying, and obviously the comments are already saying 10 is too deep. I understand. You might be right, but I'm not saying that Naquan Tomlin needs to play 12 minutes a night. I'm saying Naquan Tomlin might need to play 5. I'm saying he might need just a spurt, right? We've seen it this season. Look back to the Miami Heat series where they were in Miami for 2 games. They lost the first game when they had the stars. Second game when they had the secondary players, they were able to go on runs. We've seen it this season before they made all these trades when the Cavs needed an upgrade in intensity, in heart, in hustle, in play. They went to that second unit, and I think you have to allow them to continue to do that. And I don't want to put Max Strus in this group. And the reason I'm saying that is we do not know what version of Max Strus the Cavs are going to get when he comes back. Because the other portion of this is I asked Kobe Altman during the post-trade deadline conversation whether or not Max Strus had a timeline, because we're past the 4-week mark that we were supposed to get an update on Max Strus. We haven't heard anything. Kobe Altman, president of basketball operations, did not have a timeline. We don't know when Max Strus is going to come back. We talked about Jason Tatum having a short window, all these things. That's different because of the experience that those guys have playing together at that championship level. This is a newly constructed team with 3 pieces that could be in your top 9 of your playoff team. I think it's important that if Max Strus were to come back, he would have to understand that his role would be small. it would be more prompted based on where other guys are playing throughout the night. Matchup based, obviously, the Cavs love his tenacity. They love what he brings to the table. And Mac, the biggest thing that you mentioned earlier about Max, they could have dumped him. They could have done away with his contract, but they did not. So there is a reason for that. There is a goal for him. Whether or not he's able to execute is the telltale sign.
You heard so many reports. I mean, you're closer to it than I am. I'm just a fan. Yeah, you know that they were trying to move the salary. And I understand that why that was the case, right? Obviously, $16+ million, considering the circumstances with the salary, that's a pretty hefty chunk of change for a guy who hasn't played all season, and you've had all these individual developments happen at the positions that he happens to play. So they got some decisions heading into the offseason. We're not that far out yet, but I'll just say this. My question to you is this. Even if we got 75% of what Max Strus typically offers, you don't think that's worth at least throwing out there from a gravity standpoint in a
1,000%. So here's the thing. If he's healthy enough to get on the floor, the Cavs will throw him out there and see where he is.
Okay.
Right? But we don't know what version of that we're going to get. Right? And if he is not able to sustain a certain level of play, the thing about Max Strus is his grit, right? He wants to get out there more than anybody else.
Like as hell. Remember that game to end the year, just the 2023-24 playoffs, I think. The final game of the season was at Charlotte, where he looked pissed as hell that they lost that game.
Correct. You're absolutely right, because he is known for the heat culture moniker. Right? That's where he came from. That's how he plays. I could go back to when he first got to the team and Donovan Mitchell could not stop talking about the beak test, where he was out sprinting everybody, because that's his work ethic. But the Cavs had to pull him back in when it came to his workouts in his recovery process for his foot. A Jones fracture is one of the most difficult injuries to come back from, especially if you're known for running, cutting, off-ball movement, all of these things. Because I think there is an importance to what that does for the Cavs. The off-ball movement is critical when you talk about the spacing, the gravity that's created, all these things. But he has to be able to move. He has to be able to.
What the hell does this man be doing in the offseason to get these injuries? What is he doing?
Working out, unfortunately, working out. Because last year it was the ankle when he stepped on a coach's foot. This year it was just him going too hard in preparation for the season. And obviously knowing that Darius Garland was going to be out, he was going extra hard. So I think it's unfortunate, because last year he was out for 27 games, right? This year there's 27 games left.
That's a part that's important here. It is one thing to get back into shape. It is another thing to get back into basketball shape, and let alone playoff basketball shape. I think it's unfair to ask Max Strus to come back and immediately be ready. Listen, again, I know that we live in a world where people are not patient. We see the news with Jason Tatum doing everything he can to get back on the basketball court, and props to Jason Tatum for doing that. But I do think it is a little unfair as a fan to expect Max to come back and be ready. So he's going to need time to ramp up, assuming he does come back this season. But I can certainly understand why people might be hesitant to play him immediately right out the gate, large stints, right? Because you're going to need to get him back in shape. The basketball rotation around him, though, it's a much different landscape. Sam Merrill, who does a lot of the same things that Max does, not necessarily all of them, but he does a lot of the similar things out there. He's a little smaller than Max, but obviously he's a flamethrower. He's a top 5 shooter in the NBA right now. We have seen the emergence of Jalen Tyson, a player that I don't even think the most optimistic Cavs fan would have told you entering the year would have done this year. Right. The leap that he has taken has been phenomenal. Naquan Tomlin, Craig Porter Jr. at points during the season. There are a lot of pieces, is all I'm trying to say, that have made these decisions a lot more difficult, combined with the new acquisitions of Ellis and Schroder and guys that overlap. So I understand why Strus might not be in some people's playoff rotations. The thing that I'm interested to see, though, is whether or not they prioritize small ball because of so many talented guards that really all need to play at various points, or whether Kenny goes matchup based or situational. And here's a name that we haven't talked about at all. Speaking of small stretches, because we brought up Naquan Tomlin playing 5 minutes, Thomas Bryant.
Yeah,
Thomas Bryant is a player who he didn't play a lot of minutes, like in terms of per game totals for Indiana last year, but he had some damn big performances against New York and other teams. And so you need guys like that can sub in and provide that spark, that energy. Tell me, before we get out of here, is there a role at points this postseason for a guy like Thomas Bryant? Because I think there obviously are.
I mean, yeah, if you want to throw him in the Kendrick Perkins role and go muck things up, then yeah, that would be his
Get
role.
him out there for the Mitchell Robinsons of the world.
Exactly. Like if they wanted to go super big, right? Because we know Kenny Atkinson, right? When the Cavs are up, they're going to have more of a defensive approach, right? They're going to try and hold the lead. If they're down, they play small ball. They try to put as much offensive pressure on the floor at one time, right? So that's why Sam Merrill's played the 3. That's why Jalen Tyson's played the 4 at points this season, right? But Thomas Bryant, and I wrote a feature story on him this season because of how impactful I thought he could have been because of what he did with the Pacers last year, the Cavs seeking him out before the whole overseas debacle, which he said was not true. I just think there is limited space, right? We talk about a 10-man rotation even being too much. 2 minutes a game might be where we're talking about for Thomas Bryant, if he gets in at all, right? Because there's situations and matchups that could call for that, whether or not Jarrett Allen is struggling with Mitchell Robinson, whether or not Isaiah Stewart is trying to bully, right? All these guys that the Cavs could ultimately end up playing in the playoffs. There's different scenarios where it could happen. So I'm not going to just say that they're going to get DNP CDs for the entire playoffs. I'm not going to say that Craig Porter Jr. isn't going to get spot minutes because they need a burst defensively. Right? I'm not going to say that Larry Nance Jr. isn't going to see the floor at all, although he probably doesn't deserve to at this point in the season. There's realistic expectations for these players, and Thomas Bryant is one of them because they got him for the playoff experience. They got him for what he did last year. They got him for the added leadership, the vocalness that he has, that Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley need to have. Right. So I think it's important to note that everybody on this roster has a role. That's why this roster construction is so important, because everybody seems to know their place, know their niche, know where they can impact winning at the highest level. And Thomas Bryant has his role. Thomas Bryant is the biggest cheerleader on the team. Right. And in certain stints, there will call for times where Kenny Atkinson might look down his roster and say, this is a spot where Thomas Bryant makes sense. And whether or not he goes to him could be the biggest difference from last year. Because there were times where other players could have got run last season in the playoffs, and they didn't.
Right.
Because Kenny Atkinson was like, well, it's the playoff, 8-man rotation. We're going to stick with it. If we lose, we lose, right? But this year, I think they talked about wanting to lean on their depth. And obviously, inevitably, the rotation shrinks in the postseason. That's true. But whether or not you're willing to make moves during a game to react to adjustments, to make adjustments before the other team can react. We saw it a year ago when the Orlando Magic played Jonathan Isaac in the starting lineup to counteract, Wendell Carter Jr. in the starting lineup to counteract what the Cavs had as a 2-big lineup. Teams are actively doing that to the Cavs. Why can't the Cavs be the team to punch first for once?
That might be the realest shit I've heard in a while in regards to that, because you have for so many seasons, people are getting on JB for his use of the rotation and shorting it whenever they probably needed to lean on the depth. And you can argue at certain points where they just didn't have the depth to do that, to do it reliably. I mean, there are points where we're trying to depend upon the corpse of Danny Green and others out there. We're in a place right now where this team is deep. Now, they may not have the depth at certain positions that you want them to, but they are nevertheless deep. So I do hope that Kenny finds ways to get all of these guys because on the floor, because undoubtedly there will be points where you can use a Craig Porter Jr., where you can use a Thomas Bryant, maybe a Larry Nance Jr., and on and so forth. But I'm going to ask the question that is titled after the episode here. Do you believe that this new look Cavaliers team can compete for a title this year?
Oh boy, you put me on the spot today, man. Okay.
I know your report. I said take the reporter cap off, put the fan cap on.
That was supposed to be for the whole episode.
The whole episode, brother.
My bad. I definitely didn't do that. So here we go. Here's my unbiased, real opinion on this Cleveland Cavaliers team. This is the best chance for them to win a championship this season. Not next year, not 2 years down the road. This season. This is the best chance for the Cleveland Cavaliers to win a championship. But I still think, let me start here. I think the Cavs will get out of the Eastern Conference if they get a top 2 seed to end the season. Because that means that they do not have to play at least either Detroit, New York, or Boston, one of 2 of those before getting to the conference finals, right? They might have to face up with one beforehand, but I think when we talk about getting past the Eastern Conference, getting to the Western Conference, the importance of how that looks for this team, James Harden is going to elevate them to a caliber that will unlock players around him, as I mentioned earlier, but also just added firepower in late game situations when, again, the game inevitably slows down. That's where James Harden thrives. That's where Donovan Mitchell thrives. But how do they impact everyone around them is going to elevate from where they were earlier into the season. Obviously, Darius Garland was in the clutch player of the year conversation last year, but he plays to a different tempo. He needs to play fast rather than slow it down, which is where the Cavs and the playoffs are going to get. But I will say this. I do think that the Cavs needed to make a subsequent move after the James Harden trade to get another star, arguably Giannis, and I don't want to start a whole nother conversation, but to get past Denver, to get past OKC. Neither Donovan Mitchell nor James Harden have been to the NBA Finals since James Harden went in one of his earlier seasons with the OKC Thunder. There's a reason for that. There's teams that have beaten them. There's teams that are better than them. Donovan Mitchell hasn't gotten past the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Western Conference semifinals. So I think the Cavs will get out of the East, but I do not think that they're going to win a championship this season, even though it is their best chance to do so.
I think that's fair, though. I mean, that kind of aligns with where I'm at right now in cautious optimism. But I do think that if they do end up getting out of the East, that should be seen as progress. I think that would be a big enough selling point to not only Donovan Mitchell, but James Harden, who has a player option to commit, right? At least for the next year or 2 beyond that. I don't know what it's going to look like. I do also have to acknowledge the fact that if this goes sideways, they can pivot, and they can pivot hard. And this is why there was so much risk in the Harden deal. He could very well say, you know what? This left such a bad taste in my mouth. It didn't work out. I'm not exercising my player option. Well, that would be crazy because there's so much money on the table, but you would assume that he could make that up elsewhere. Hence the risk involved. I say all of this to say that they made this trade knowing all of the risks, and Donovan Mitchell endorsed this. Apparently, you know, it had his blessing, and I understand that. So, in all of that, I'm staying cautiously optimistic. I'm not trying to get too high because I haven't even seen them play one playoff game together, let alone the full rotation being at full strength. You know, we haven't seen Mobley next to Harden and Allen. We just haven't clarified who's going to be the starter at the 3. There's so many unanswered questions. So it's so hard for me right here to sit up here and say, yeah, this team is going to win a championship this year. But I can't say is seeing what we have seen through the first 3 games of the Harden experience, the ceiling is there. Whatever happens out west, I don't know, because there's a lot of teams out there that could potentially give Cleveland some issues. But I think they're better equipped now than they were to begin the season. And I think that's the important part. That's where I'm at. Ethan, I appreciate you taking the time to join me on such short notice. This was wonderful, as always. Very, very insightful. Thank you for taking the reporter cap off for me. I know sometimes it's kind of hard and you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're boxed in, but I appreciate you making the time for me, man. Tell the people where they can find you, as if they already don't know.
I appreciate you for having me on, Mac. It's a pleasure. Obviously, aggregators are crazy nowadays, so we got to be careful. But you can catch me, Ethan Sands, my work on cleveland.com/Cavs, or you can find stuff on the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We have YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I've actually already recorded an episode for today that should have gone up earlier, but you know, when Matt comes calling, you answer the phone. So hope you guys come tune in and catch up with all the work that I have going on, because we hope it's going to be a long playoff run, and I hope to give you guys all the content that you readily desire and deserve.
They appreciate you again, man. And as I always tell you guys, if you like to reach out to me, you know how you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to do your boy a favor and support the show in a small but helpful way, consider becoming a member over on Patreon. You can do it on YouTube, too, for as little as $1 a month. And by chance, if you're still here by now, do your boy a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you're not yet subscribed to the It's Cavalier podcast. Do the same for my other channel, Positive Hooper. And with that being said, go Cavs.